The Senate will come to order. Our chaplain, the Reverend Dr. Barry Black, will open the Senate in prayer.
Let us pray. God, our help in ages past, at your throne we find our faith and strength. Lord, help us to know ourselves dependent upon your mercy and grace. In this great hour of human destiny, surpassing opportunity to permit you to use them as instruments for your glory. Lord, fit them to protect our nation from enemies, foreign and domestic, as you do for us all, more than we can ask or imagine. Create in us a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within us. We pray in your powerful name. Amen.
Please join me in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance to the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. The clerk will read a communication to the Senate.
Washington, D.C., July 25, 2024, to the Senate. Under the provisions of Rule 1, Paragraph 3 of the Standing Rules of the Senate, I hereby appoint the Honorable Raphael G. Warnock, a senator from the state of Georgia, to perform the duties of the chair. Signed, Patty Murray, President pro tempore.
Under the previous order, the leadership time is reserved. Morning business is closed. Under the previous order, the Senate will resume consideration of the House message to accompany S-2073, which the clerk will report.
House message to accompany S-2073, an act to amend Title 31 United States Code to require agencies to include a list of outdated or duplicative reporting requirements in annual budget justifications and other purposes.
Mr. President.
The Majority Leader.
Mr. President, as we all know, social media has been part of our lives for 2 decades. It's connected people in ways previous generations never could have fathomed. But with the benefits of social media, also come the risks. Many kids experience relentless online bullying. Kids' private personal data can be collected and used nefariously. Predators can exploit or target kids. And for kids who struggle with mental health, social media can magnify their anguish. It's been decades since the federal government has updated laws that protect our kids on the internet. But today, historically, the Senate has a chance to start changing that with bipartisan legislation. This afternoon, the Senate will vote to advance 2 bipartisan bills, the Kids Online Safety Act, or KOSA, and an update to the Children and Teens Online Privacy Protection Act, or COPPA. KOSA and COPPA represent something very urgent, a first step to keeping our kids safe on social media and other online platforms. I'm hopeful we can act on these 2 bills swiftly. They've already passed out of the Commerce Committee for the last 2 years under the careful guidance of Chairman Cantwell. And KOSA has 68 co-sponsors, bipartisan, more than enough to pass this chamber. Getting here wasn't easy. I've worked for years with my colleagues on both sides of the aisle to prepare these bills for the floor. I want to thank Senators Blumenthal and Blackburn and Markey and Cassidy. They have been a relentless and powerful force to get these bills moving. I made sure everyone had a chance to offer their input, and we worked together through any disagreements. Finalizing these safety bills has been a long and winding and difficult road. But one thing I've known from the start, it sure would be worth it. And we must remember, we could never have reached this point without parents of children who tragically took their own lives because of what happened to them on social media, who came down here to relentlessly lobby and tell their stories. Over the past few months, I've sat down with these parents. I've listened to their stories. They're some of the most painful but important meetings I've ever had. We cried together. We looked at pictures of their kids gone and felt the deep frustration that we must do more as a society to keep kids safe online. Looking at these pictures made me think of my own children, now in their 30s, and my grandkids, 5, 2, and 1. Noah, Ellie, and Henry. And the thought of losing them is incomprehensible. The message from these parents has been simple and consistent. It's been long enough. The Senate must pass kids' online safety legislation with all due haste. So today, as we begin voting on these bills, I want to thank the parents who turned their grief into grace. The parents who turned their grief into grace. I want to thank them and thank them again. Nobody would blame these parents if they preferred to process their pain in privacy, curse the darkness, but instead they've shared their stories, pushed the Senate into action, lit a candle to make sure other families won't suffer, as they have been suffering and always will. Now, on AI deepfakes, this is an important bill, but it's been a busy and frenzied week in Washington, so there's been a lot of news about major speeches, congressional hearings, but this also deserves attention, even though it passed late Tuesday night, after most were gone. This week, the Senate passed the Defiance Act, a bill to combat the spread of sexually explicit AI-generated deepfakes. And we also passed another act on fentanyl, which I'll get to in a minute. But these 2 bills passed, as I said, late in the evening Tuesday, but deserve significant attention. AI plays a bigger role in our lives than ever before. And while it has many, many benefits, it's also easier than ever to create sexually explicit deepfakes without a person's consent. These fake explicit images can ruin a person's life, especially if you're a child or a teenager. They can circulate online for years, if not forever, with no or little recourse to hold abusers accountable. And make no mistake about it, this is not a fringe problem. 90% of deepfake videos are non-consensual. And 2023 saw more deepfakes generated than every other year combined. Bad people, some for mercenary purposes, some just kids who have who do bad things, have learned about this, and the idea is spreading. And no one's immune from it. Not kids in school, not members of Congress, not even, as we've learned recently, the most famous celebrities in the world. The Defiance Act will give these victims justice by allowing them to take civil action against those who generate and distribute deep fakes using AI and other technologies. As I've said before, this Defiance Act is one example of the AI guardrails I often talk about. AI is remarkable technology. It can spur incredible innovation. Maybe it'll even cure cancer and things like that. But at the same time, we must be vigilant and pass guardrails to prevent its worst abuses from causing people grave harm. I'm very hopeful that the House will pass this bill quickly. It got broad support here in the Senate. And I want to thank Senator Durbin for leading the effort relentlessly on the Defiance Act. I've been proud to support this bill every step of the way and encourage its passage. And Tuesday night, we finally got it done here in the Senate. House, move quickly. Save people from the scourge of this horrible, horrible action. And on Tuesday night, we also passed, as I mentioned, another significant bill, another crucial bill to combat the scourge of drug trafficking, the Preventing the Financing of Illegal Synthetic Drugs Act. This bill will get to the root of the financing behind deadly and destructive drugs like fentanyl and methamphetamine. I want to thank every senator who supported this bill, particularly our two amazing senators from Nevada, Catherine Cortez Masto and Jackie Rosen. They worked very hard to see that this happened, that this bill passed. In drug trafficking, this drug trafficking bill is the latest example of a concerted effort in the Senate to combat America's drug crisis. Last fall, I met with Chinese President Xi, along with my colleagues, bipartisan, and we urged him and the Chinese government to do more to crack down on Chinese companies that make precursor chemicals, send them to Mexico where the gangs turn them into fentanyl. A few months ago, I led the Senate in passing the National Security Supplemental, which included the Fend Off Fentanyl Act. So we're making good progress in the scourge of fentanyl, which has had tens of thousands of our young people die, and some of our law enforcement officers as well. So the American people should take note. There have been some very important things happening in the Senate recently to combat drug trafficking. This bill has already passed the House. It should go to the President's desk and be signed quickly. Another marker, another action in our fight to end the horrible scourge of fentanyl, which has taken so many young lives. Now, I was just at a press conference on something else that we had to do to make America better, and that is the World Trade Center Health Program. We all know that in the aftermath of 9/11, many of our brave first responders suffered severe health complications, lifelong injuries, serious cancers. Many of them, far too many of them, are no longer with us. I remember them as they trod the halls to try and pass this legislation, even though they were suffering from cancer. My friend Ray Pfeiffer, I think of him all the time. He's gone now, looking down upon us, smiling that we're moving forward. So I fought hard to establish and fund the World Trade Center program and to help our 9/11 heroes get care at no cost to them or their families. That program has struggled with funding. We've had to renew it year after year after year because there were some here in the Senate, some in the House, who said, I don't want to fund it permanently. But now we are attempting to fund it permanently. Sadly, the program has struggled with funding over the years, but today we have good news, very good news. I just returned from a press conference with my colleague, Senator Gillibrand, and members, Democrat and Republican, of the New York delegation in the House, and we announced permanent legislation to permanently fund the World Trade Center program. That's right, not coming back year after year and getting a little more and a little more, but permanent. We need to fund it permanently. There are people still getting cancers, first responders and others, who rushed to the towers after 9/11, but their cancers don't show up till 10 or 20 or 30 years later. We can't leave them behind. This funding will make sure everyone who has been exposed to the toxins after 9/11 will get the treatment they need. And because the program screens early, we catch more people, we save more lives, and frankly, it costs less to keep them alive. I am proud to have secured nearly $1.7 billion for this program over the last 2 years. $1 billion 2 years ago, $700 million this, just to keep extending the program because it was running out of money because more people are getting these cancers and other illnesses. But it was clear to all of us that we needed to do more. By providing permanent funding for this program, our legislation will make sure our 9/11 heroes never, ever have to worry again about getting the care they need. They won't have to constantly traipse down on subways from New York and elsewhere to lobby Congress and go to those with somewhat hardened hearts and show them why it's needed. Let's pass this bill. Let's make it permanent. And I promise to those first responders, to Ray Pfeiffer and all those who have been lost and have fought for this, that I will do all I can to make sure this permanent bill becomes law by the end of the year. On President Biden. Last night, the American people saw why Joe Biden will go down as one of our nation's most consequential, most decent, most patriotic presidents. Over the last 3 years, he has amassed a record of accomplishment that has few equals in the history of the Senate. We in the Senate here, in many times bipartisan, sometimes not, worked hard with the president to create one of the great legislative records in the year 2022. When President Biden entered office, America was in crisis. But today it is stronger, more prosperous, has a more hopeful future because of his steadfastness, his strength, his vision. So this morning I wish to say yet again, thank you, Mr. President. Thank you. You've shown what the world looks like to put our country over self. You have restored dignity and honesty and integrity to the White House. I think of the song in Hamilton, we're going to teach them how to say goodbye, that George Washington sang in the play anyway, about not knowing when to stay and when to leave. Well, at this moment, Joe Biden is standing right next to George Washington in showing America he understood that message. It's been an honor to work with the President to enact the most ambitious legislative agenda since the Great Society. With President Biden, we have made tens of millions of Americans' lives better, and we'll keep working with him until his term is complete. And finally, as colleagues know, I rarely go anywhere without my either famous or notorious, depending on your viewpoint, flip phone. That means I'll occasionally, just occasionally, forget to leave my phone in the cloakroom, as the rules say, when I'm here on the Senate floor. And occasionally, just occasionally, it will ring in the middle of my remarks. You've heard that happen. Whenever it happens, the first thing I do is look up at Laverne Allen, one of our wonderful Senate doorkeepers, as she's staring at my phone and very gently but firmly shaking her head as I quickly try to turn it off. Laverne is one of the people in the Senate who can readily put me in my place. But I'm sad to say that over 40 years, 40 great years, Laverne's time with the Senate will be coming to an end next month. And here, we often celebrate elected officials who dedicate their entire careers to public service, but today that light shines on Laverne. As a doorkeeper, she's helped maintain the order and decorum that have defined the Senate for over 200 years. We are all on both sides of the aisle, as I'm sure the Republican leader will attest, grateful for her work. But I'm glad to hear that Laverne will be moving on to bigger and better things. She'll be spending more time with her son in Japan, where he's stationed in the Navy. So Laverne, from the bottom of my heart and the hearts of all my colleagues, thank you, thank you, thank you. We'll miss you. Best of luck in your next journey. I yield the floor.
The Republican leader.
This morning, as the Majority Leader just pointed out, marks an important day for a longtime member of the Senate family who will depart for greener pastures next month. After 41 years of service, Laverne Allen, a familiar and friendly face to so many of our colleagues, past and present, is retiring from Senate doorkeepers. Laverne has seen the Senate from many different angles. She's worn many different hats, from the card desk to the reception room, and for years now, she's welcomed senators, staff, and visitors right here to the Senate chamber. Alongside the brave men and women of the Capitol Police, our doorkeepers control access to this historic institution. Here on the floor, they keep us safe. Up in the galleries, they give citizens the chance to watch democracy in action. After more than 4 decades, Laverne has certainly earned a break from all of us and eventually some exciting international. Today, on behalf of the entire Senate, I want to congratulate Laverne on her retirement, thank her for her years of devotion and service to this institution. Now, on an entirely different matter, yesterday I was proud to attend a joint meeting of Congress and listen to Prime Minister Netanyahu's message from Israel to America. He reminded us of our nation's deep friendship, of the savagery of our shared enemies, of the sacrifices brave Israelis are making to combat them on behalf of the entire free world, and of the enduring importance of American leadership. It was a powerful address. I wish more of our colleagues had heard it, but those who needed to hear it the most were otherwise occupied. Vice President Harris was on the campaign trail. Most of the Hamas apologists in Congress boycotted it. And of course, a mob of far-left terrorist sympathizers was too busy vandalizing our nation's capital to tune in. The lawless behavior of frenzied radicals in our own country over the past 36 hours only underscores the challenge facing the world's only Jewish state. When the Jewish people try to live in peace in their homeland, they're murdered in their beds. When Jewish students try to go to class, their classmates and professors lock arms to block their way. And when the leader of Israel comes to Washington, the same useful to sow chaos. On Tuesday night, criminals vandalized the hotel where Prime Minister Netanyahu was staying, scattered crickets across hallways, covered a dinner table with maggots, and pulled the fire alarm. Outside, I'm going to kill all of you. Then, after vandalizing private property, radical organizers called another play vandalizing federal property, tearing down and burning the American flag that flew over Columbus Circle and the Union Station, defacing public monuments with terrorist screeds. And lest anyone doubt their seriousness, burning the Prime Minister in effigy. So, Mr. President, yesterday was the 26th anniversary of horrific shootings of the U.S. Capitol Police Officer Jacob Chestnut and Detective John Gibson in the line of duty. That day will always be a sobering reminder of the sacrifices of law enforcement and the price of protecting this sacred institution. It's an especially difficult day of reflection for the brave men and women following in Officer Chestnut and Detective Gibson's footsteps. And yet, officers of the Capitol Police had to spend it dispersing violent anti-Israel and anti-Semitic agitators. I'm grateful for the vigilance of the Capitol Police and partner agencies on the job yesterday. Law enforcement knows better than anyone that when it comes to radical attention seekers, there's nothing new under the sun. Not their tactics, certainly not the slap on the wrist they receive from soft-on-crime prosecutors. This week, it's anti-Semites painting Hamas slogans on public property. But last year, as our colleagues may recall, it was left-wing climate protesters who took their cues from the Taliban and tried to destroy priceless works of art over at the Smithsonian. A kind French sculpture in the National Gallery. She succeeded in damaging it and was sentenced this spring to 60 days in prison. Thank goodness she got that much. Prosecutors had only asked for 30 days. Never mind that the sentencing guidelines recommend 5 years, given the gravity of her actions. We know by now that street criminals aren't the only ones the Biden administration and liberal prosecutors like to let off easy. It's the wealthy eco-terrorists and the campus Marxists as well. But I'm still amazed at how allergic liberal prosecutors are to exercising their authority with an even hand. January 6th, rightly so. My view has always been that when extremists conspire, no matter their politics. But will they pursue the lawless radicals inspired by October 7th with equal vigor? Will the district's own government exercise the authority Congress has given it to maintain order and discourage lawless behavior? Don't hold your breath. In the meantime, passing the National Defense Authorization Act.
The clerk will call the roll.
Ms. Baldwin.